Creating a Self-Directed Learning Environment by Greg Mullen. Introduction. Exploring the core. Exploring is an extremely difficult task, especially when time is not an infinite resource. It requires patience, a curious spirit, and a willingness to be wrong at times. Most important, exploring requires a question or a topic to be considered. Exploring will inevitably result in findings related to the question or topic that spur other questions or topics that go well beyond what was being explored in the first place. My exploration began with a fairly general topic, to understand the Common Core State Standards. I began with the math standards and quickly discovered patterns of specific skill development in and across grade levels. Some math concepts, such as place value, are rooted in nearly all grade levels, while other concepts, such as fractions, start at the third grade level and stop at the end of the fifth grade level. This insight to skill development helped me to see how concepts such as place value develop as early as kindergarten and on through upper elementary and middle school math skills. This also helped me to see how the concept of place value supported those skills that seem to develop quite quickly over a shorter period of time, such as fractions, in grades 3 through 5. It seemed to me that each standard had been crafted to account for how a skill develops both in and across grade levels. When I dove into the Common Core State Standards for English Language Arts, I saw similar and more explicit skill development that allowed me to identify the expected understanding implied across grade level standards. Exploring these ideas allowed me to identify how academic gaps can form, leaving both teacher and student in a lurch if a student did not master a particular grade level skill. Because I was exploring and open to discovery, I compared my findings with the Common Core State Standards to other states' standards. It was very cool to see how standards across states align, not by grade level specifically, but by skill development. Certain aspects of a skills development occur in a particular order, no matter what state standards I explored. The biggest difference was the differences in how quickly different skills developed across grade levels. The way standards were phrased and organized was also a major difference, but it began to seem as though the intent of the standards and how they developed skills across grade levels was consistent across states. The initial exploration evolved into an analysis of implementing grading practices, defining proficiency, and utilizing assessments. I began to feel that these academic standards were intentionally written to guide educators through these other aspects. Skills are defined in these standards and aligned by grade level, but it became clear to me that each skill is not dependent on the grade level as a measure of time, but as a measure of individual skill development. As I continued to explore these deeper-rooted inquiries into the implementation of academic standards, I found myself exploring a related area of education, social and emotional learning. This extension of my original exploration was the result of conversations regarding student obstacles that were not rooted in the academic standards, but in classroom management and student motivation. The more I explored, the more I began to realize the many correlations between social and emotional learning and academic achievement. This exploration eventually led me to consider both the causal and correlative relationships between cognitive, psychosocial, and social-emotional development with regard to academic progress. I came to believe that development in one of these areas will struggle when development in other areas also struggle. I would ask colleagues the following hypothetical question in order to spark discussion. If a child was raised by animals without any human, social, or emotional upbringing, would the child develop the cognitive brain functions to be a fully functioning human adult? Now, this would typically ignite conversation and fractalize out to include such topics as culture, environment, and related interests in child development, resulting in healthy discussion, but without conclusive consensus. Today, my exploration now involves the connections between academic, social, emotional, and human development, and has created a unique perspective that I now hold very dear. It is a perspective that requires an awareness of interconnectivity of these exclusive areas of study. I now use 3 conjoining circles to represent these 3 areas and how they can be overlapped, combined, to create new secondary concepts. At the center of these 3 circles is the core of my exploration. This core is an idea that looks at the whole person, and an idea that I hope will spark value in others exploring their own self, others around them, as well as their communities, both small and large. I am thankful for the freedom of my exploration, unrestrained and interdisciplinary, that allowed me to connect with various professionals in areas of academic, social, emotional, and cognitive development. The value of my findings from my own perspective as an educator has been incredibly helpful to my own development, and I hope others will continue exploring these connections and further their own findings. It is important to me that every person be allowed their own personal and professional perspectives and determine value of any exploratory findings as they relate to their needs. Exploring has been and will continue to be a privilege, and I thank my colleagues, friends, family, and you, the reader, for taking the time to consider the core of this exploration toward creating a self-directed learning environment.